Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, education and research.
Well, hello, and welcome to the Gift of Gab podcast. I'm your host, Gabe, and I want to thank you for joining us for episode 2 of the podcast here since the relaunch. And by episode 2, I mean episode 1, but it would have been episode 2 if I wouldn't have upped the first one. Why did I censor myself? This is my own podcast. I have no idea. But what I do know is that sometimes you know exactly what you want to say, but that doesn't mean that you can say it. And I found that out the hard way when I decided to not create an outline for what I wanted to talk about for the first episode. So we got pushed back a little bit. And the reason that we're not going to focus on the topic that we were going to be talking about with that episode is because it's Black History Month. And Black history is important because it's all of our history. And so to shed some light on the experience of Black people in America, I have lined up 2 interviews that are jam-packed full of not only experience, but wisdom and intelligence and knowledge that comes along with that, along with some helpful tips that we can all use to make this a better society for us all to live in together. So we are going to get to that in just a moment. I do know that for some of you, this might not be your first time watching the Gift of Gab podcast, and that is because there was a first iteration of this podcast, and that randomly stopped about a year or so ago. And I do want to get into the details of why that stopped, because it's led me to where I'm at now, which is in a much better place. Thank you for asking. I know you didn't. I'm just trying to keep the conversation going, and it's seeming a little one-sided right now, but that's okay. You'll adjust. So we will be visiting that topic after Black History Month. But first and foremost, I want to get into these interviews. And this week's interview comes with a friend of mine who has actually been more like a mother figure to me through the course of our friendship. And she is probably one of the nicest people I know, but also one of the most blunt people I know. So I'm excited to have her illuminate a little bit on what her experience has been like, and see what we can glean from that. So, without any further ado, Vera Saeli, welcome to the podcast.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Can you hear me? Good.
Yeah,
How
can
are
you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. Now, I got to see where to put this so my phone doesn't fall over. All right. See you perfectly.
You look so great.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it's weekly get dolled up to go to the Walmart pickup.
Naturally. It's the only
Right.
place that you can get dressed up to go anymore.
Pretty much.
Well, thank you for doing this.
Absolutely.
We've known each other for a few years now, since about 2014.
About
2015.
Yeah, I was going to say probably earlier than that. I was going to probably 2013, 2012, 2013.
It's crazy. It doesn't feel like that long until you start counting backwards.
Go back the years. Yes.
Now, you've lived in Venango County your entire life?
Mostly. I grew up here and I left periodically, but then when I decided to have a family, I set base here.
Okay. Was there a particular reason for that?
Because family was close by. It's a small town. I didn't want to raise my kids in a city, and mostly though because family was close by, so they could have just life with their family. We weren't going to be spread out all over the place.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about your experience just growing up and everything that you've experienced. Obviously, recent events have kind of shifted the conversation as far as our society as a whole.
Right.
But what are some things that you experienced growing up and changes that you've seen during that time working up till now?
Honestly, I experienced my first encounter with racism when I went to kindergarten. I didn't experience it prior to that. You know, I was, of course, not in any type of school environment. I wasn't around other people other than my family and the neighbors. And the neighbors that we had, they never treated us any different. My first crush and playmate, was the white kid who lived next door, who was my age, and we were going to get married and, have kids, and nobody discouraged that. His parents didn't, my family didn't. So from the day I walked into kindergarten is when I came face to face for the first time with absolute hatred because of the color of my skin. I was spit on, I was kicked, I was called the N-word repeatedly with 5-year-old children. Of course, there might have been about 6 or 7-year-olds who didn't make it out of kindergarten, but for the most part, they were 5-year-olds that were behaving this way. And if it wasn't for my kindergarten teacher that I had, I don't even know what kind of experience that if I would have had the guts to keep going every day. She would definitely come between it. She did try to, protect me from that. But I mean, that's when it started at the ripe age of 5. So that was my first experience.
I think that would be devastating for a lot of people to hear just because, I mean, you don't expect it. I mean, surely it was unexpected for you in the moment.
It was.
Why do you think that was? I mean, I know that prior to you going to school, you were talking about how you were in that little bubble of your community.
Right. I was.
I guess the thing that shocks me is even if that kind of behavior is exemplified by their parents or their guardians or whatnot, where a kid gets the audacity to act like that, which I'm the kind of person that doesn't want kids, doesn't like to be around kids. So just I don't even think about the fact that kids are just crazy to begin with. But I mean, it's kind of shocking to think that kids would act that way without it being put before them as acceptable. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and as you get older, you think about those things what did those kids deal with in their personal life?
Right.
They behave that way in kindergarten. Okay. That they would be so hateful and violent at such a young age. So of course, as a child, you don't think about that. For me, the only thing I thought about was defending myself against the people who were acting like that towards me.
Yeah.
I didn't care what the reason was. At the time, it was just not going to get beat up at school, and they're going to learn that they're not going to be able to beat me up at school. And that was my mentality. This won't happen. I won't be picked on like that. So yeah.
Even when you even as you get older, I would assume that understanding where they're coming from, or not mental manipulation of being able to get inside their head type thing and stop it from the inside, but sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to perfectly phrase this. You were saying that your mentality was just, it wasn't going to happen.
That was my mentality, that I'm going to have to put a stop to this, and let them know that I'm not going to be afraid of them. That was my mentality. Don't show fear, stand up to them, even if they could, because these were boys and girls, so even if they could maybe, whoop that ass, I wasn't going to let them know that they could. So that was my mentality. I didn't care about why they were acting that way. I didn't care about, their parents or who was teaching them that way at the time. All I thought about was self-preservation at the time.
Was there anything that your parents or your family did to prepare you for that kind of experience? I know that
They warned me, you know, that people are going to say things, they're going to call me names. Back, well, keep in mind, I'm 50 now. So I watched the sitcoms, you know, with them, like All in the Family and stuff
right.
like that. And they told me, you know, not everybody's going to treat you like the boy who treated me next door or like their neighbors. So they knew that I was going to face it. Don't know if they knew it was going to be that bad, you know, at first, but they knew I would face it.
See, that's the thing too, is like, I would assume for them it was a similar type of experience for them growing up, but
Yes.
probably more intense or worse.
Yes. Yes.
And so I guess that's one thing that is like a question for me, is how does progress affect raising kids generationally? Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? Are there changes that you saw since your childhood that made you raise your children in a different way than your parents would have raised you based on their experience?
Honestly, you know, and yes, there's progress, but if you're a person of color, and I don't care if you're 10 or 60, it's a reality that you have to deal with. So, you know, I went to school first in the 70s. I dealt with that throughout elementary school. Okay. Like, I mean, all the time. It's not like I didn't have friends. I did. You know, I had friends who helped me stand up against stuff like that. But it happened regardless. You know, there was always somebody that was going to come after me because of the color of my skin. And that continued like pretty much through like 7th grade. So until we got to the middle school, well, things were a lot more strict when you get to a middle school and high school. And I had a good group of friends, but you could even see then it started to be a little bit less, you know, the way that kids who came from homes where they were taught prejudice and racism, they started to kind of go underground with it and not be so overt with it. So you could even see it back then when I was in middle school that it was starting to change a little bit. So when I had my kids, I told them, you know, I didn't sugarcoat anything. You know, these are things you may experience when you go to school, and people will look at you, you know, and my kids, just because they're, you know, biracial and they look more biracial than I did, it doesn't matter. People are going to say things. They're going to see I'm your mother. You're going to face things based off of, because people are prejudiced. So be ready for it. Yeah, and they did. So I raised them in a totally different generation than I was raised in. So.
Was there any sort of I don't want to say like kickback, but was there any sort of challenges with like the teachers or the administration at the school and getting them to do anything about situations like that?
I was in elementary school, I had an incredible group of teachers. They did not tolerate, you know, that kind of behavior. They were, you know, truly, when people say teachers are your heroes, like a lot of the teachers I had in elementary school, they really were, because they knew I was a good student. You know, they had my back. You know, they did not tolerate that kind of behavior whatsoever. And it continued for the most part into middle school. But in high school, you know, there were certain things like, okay, maybe they're not going to have, you know, these kids like yelling racial slurs or trying to attack you in the hallway for that sort of thing. But in high school, I still faced, you know, discrimination because of the color of my skin. A story that sticks out to me is when my senior year, I had thought, you know what, you know, I've been doing like these talent shows and things like that. I really want to be a nighette. That's what the dancers were called, you know, for our high school. And I was like, I can dance. I love dancing. I was great at dancing. It was the natural thing. You know, the girlfriends that I had thought, oh yeah, you know, come be on the squad. It's going to be so much fun. You're such a great dancer, and you can like help us choreograph things. There were a couple of older teachers that were on the panel to pick the nighthettes. And another teacher is an English teacher. He pulled me aside and said, they're never going to let you be on the nighthettes. And I said, why? You know, and he flat out told me. And he said, a couple of those teachers had said they didn't want me to darken up the squad, and they will never pick me. No, he said, I dance circles around these girls. Half of them have zero rhythm, and they will never pick me. And he was right. And another one of my teachers pointed out to me, this is also again my senior year, he asked me if I was going to my senior prom, and I said no. And he said, that's probably for the best. He's like, because no matter how popular you are, no matter how beautiful you are, he's like, they'll never pick you for prom queen. He's like, they'll never pick you for anything. So he wasn't wrong. There was still that degree of discrimination when I was in school. When I was in my senior year, it was a big deal to get somebody to be homecoming queen that just went to the tech. So you can understand that, if it was a huge accomplishment just to get somebody from Tech to be on some quarter queen, that would have taken probably, a law change to get me to be on something like that. So, but, it is what it is.
Now, you've always been a strong person, at least as long as I've known you. But in those times, was there anything that you did to kind of keep yourself mentally stable? Because I would imagine, at least for me, of course, I suffer from a lot of mental illness, but I know for me, if I were going through something like that, it would be extremely frustrating, probably to the point of breaking.
My friends were amazing. Like the friends that I had growing up, they helped me through a lot of things because I had a lot of things in my personal life, not just with school. They were probably the biggest strength that I had at school. And I'm not going to lie. Of course, I started partying. When any person starts going through any kind of traumas, abuse of any kind, they tend to act out in a negative way, so, and I did. So I did when I was in high school. I partied a lot, but I still say the thing that really helped the most though was the friends that I had, that they had my back through whatever, they weren't going to let, some old bat teachers take my joy, so, I would be in other shows that, that these particular teachers might not have any control over, and they would prop me up with, the praise from that because they knew what was going on too. So, but I would say that that's probably the biggest thing.
Now, you said that when he was telling you that he had made a comment it doesn't matter how beautiful you are, how good you are. Up to that point, was there any sort of maybe even a subconscious pressure to be better than the white kids because you knew that you were being graded more harshly?
For different standards?
Yeah.
I had family members who would tell me that, that would kind of to bring you can't do certain things because, you got to do better than that because people would think, oh, well, I represent every Black person, on the continent, so I would have family members that would kind of say things like that. But honestly, I didn't really feel that. I had good grades. It wasn't like I was a flunky or anything. So I did have good grades. I was participated in clubs, groups, talent shows, things like that. So me, myself personally, I didn't think that I had to be better than my peers because that I was a different color. I just wanted to be me. That's it. And if they liked me for who I was going to be, then I was cool with that. And also to kind of spread, I don't know, I talked to somebody just about this the other day. I really hated bigotry and prejudice. And I hated it in all levels, for the kids who were not the popular ones, the kids who, they didn't have, the great looks that, people think high school kids should have, that lessen attract. I believed in inclusion to not, cancel those people out. So that was kind of I guess you want to say, my campaign through school is to be that way because I understood it. Not to be better, not to I have to do so much better than my peers. I didn't have that in the back of my head, even though it was whispered in my ear that I needed to. But no, and I never put that in my children either. You don't have to be number one because of the color of your skin. You just need to be you and be truthful to yourself.
Well, I feel like that's kind of like a catch-22 in a way that, I mean, I'm sure that when, your family was putting that in your head, it was from the mentality of wanting to protect you, not wanting anything bad to happen.
Right.
But it also puts a lot of pressure on a kid. Do you think that maybe just because of your natural abilities that's part of the reason that you didn't feel the pressure, is just because you weren't at risk to be some heathen on the street, you know what I mean? like you said, you were good at school, you behaved and all of that. So do you think that that's part of the reason that kind of didn't take?
I think I was just young, and when you're young, and especially a teenager, you think you know everything. And so I just think, I always just thought, I might be different in certain people's eyes than my peers, but I'm not different. I'm 16 or I'm 17, yeah, I'm gonna go to the games, I'm gonna go to parties, I am not different than they are. And I don't know, I think that I too thought, some of my family, well, that was your generation, you couldn't do certain things because things were worse then. And I knew what things were like when I was young too. But I just kind of think I came from a place where people of color had a little bit more freedom. In my generation, we didn't have to be perfect. We could speak out. We could speak our minds. Yes, there was going to be racism. There's always going to be racism. So I think I was just lucky to be in the generation that I was compared to, my older relatives, because they couldn't speak out. Bless you.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's interesting, as a white person, and it's crazy because, like, not to compare black people to cars, but that, like, when you get a car, you start to see that car everywhere. There's like that awareness to it.
Yes.
Like, I feel like for a lot of white people, like, until they have, not to be like tokenist, but like a black friend, or have some sort of connection to that kind of experience,
right.
You can talk about it, and you might even be able to point out situations where certain prejudices or certain discrimination is occurring, but you don't really see the just how much it permeates somebody's life.
Exactly. You have to live it, which, and even though he's not going to do the interview with us, but, my husband, as a white male, he had to see what it was like to walk similarly in my shoes when we got together, especially in a small town. Like I said, I think it was different in a small town. I mean, because, there's always been like interracial couples. So, but not like us in a small town, like even in this town, very few white men were with black women. I mean, I think I maybe knew one couple. So that was that kind of dynamic. So yeah, until you either bring in a person of color and that you care for, you're probably not going to kind of get what a person of color goes through. I mean, just even this basic discrimination and racism is just, it's gross. And you probably won't feel that until you're with someone that then they treat you the same.
Right.
So, in which my husband has been treated the same because of me, or not because of me, I shouldn't say that, but because of the small-mindedness of the people who are treating him, think that way.
Now, when did you and Bill first meet? Because how shortly you went to college?
Actually, I didn't go to college until we were married.
Oh, okay.
So Bill and I first met, technically we met at a dance. We were still like very young teenagers, and he was like
one of the Y dances.
It was a KFC dance, actually.
That's so small town,
isn't it? Yeah, but you love them because I love to go dancing. It was like my favorite thing. On the weekends as a teenager around here, and he was like the rocker dude. Just to put it in perspective, even being a person of color, I was very popular at school. I had a lot of friends. I dressed in all the latest fashion trends. We don't sing. We don't look like the people that would sing. He had really long dark hair. He reminded me of somebody like, I don't know, like one of the hair bands of the 80s. He really looked like that. But I thought that was cool because music's my favorite thing on earth.
I was going to say, I feel like that's exactly what he was going for.
Well, yeah, he loved music too. He was a musician. He played guitar. He loved music. So how we technically met was at the dance. The DJs were always real cool to play, mostly dance music, but they'd throw a little, hard rock, heavy metal in for the headbangers, So I wanted to see what it was like to headbang, I'm like, what do they get out of that? I love dancing. I know what I feel. Like all this joy. It's so much fun. So I want to see a headbanging and throwing your head back and forth, blah, blah, blah. So I decided to do it. Like, I'm going to try it out. Some Metallica song was on. Bill knows the song. I don't remember the song, and I went over and I didn't know it was him, but I just chose somebody and was laying on their back, kind of headbanging with them. And he's like, oh my God, she's right on top of me. And so his sister told me later on that he'd had a crush on me. And it's she couldn't believe that I was right near him, headbanging on him.
So you knew him from school then, or?
I didn't actually know him at all. I knew his sister. He went to a different, but I knew who his sister was, but I didn't know him at all.
Okay, and so how did the relationship spark following that?
It took a while. I think we were probably, I'm a year older than him, so I think at that time at the dance I might have been 17 or 18. So a lot happened between then and before we got together. We both left this area. It wasn't until we both ended up back in this area in 1990. It was a long time ago. And he was shy, but he met me after work one night and walked me home. But things really didn't spark till the November of 1990. His sister was like, you know what, you guys have been talking but not moving forward. Seeing each other but not moving forward. And we've both been through quite some traumatic things. So she's like, why don't you guys just come to my apartment and just spend some time together and see what happens? And so the rest is history.
Every relationship needs a facilitator.
For us to just, come on, guys, just you're little, oh, let's go play basketball, or let me walk you home from work. He's like, that's not going anywhere. So we'll spend some actual time together.
Now, was there any sort of I know that knowing the person, obviously you don't want to think that there's any sort of negative thing in the back of their head, but did your experience growing up affect how you went into dating? Obviously, particularly white men. Actually,
I did not discriminate. Some of my girlfriends, because I had some Black girlfriends, when I was growing up, but not many. They would refuse to date, maybe somebody that was I don't know, too short, or in their minds short. I had a no discrimination policy because I didn't, so I was like, oh, Native American, cool, okay. And there wasn't a lot of diversity here, keep in mind. But when I left this area, it's oh yeah, it's oh man, this Puerto Rican guy, we're gonna go out. I just loved meeting and dating people from different backgrounds. And I never would have believed the person that I married came from Venango County. I never thought that would happen. That was not even on my radar. That was probably my discrimination, was I don't want to marry a small town doofus. It's I want to marry kind of that rebel against, just closed-mindedness, but that's who Bill is. So, and that's, I think, was what brought us together, besides the music, is he didn't care. He didn't care what anybody had to say. He knew exactly what was going to hit if he and I hit it off and we actually got into a relationship. He knew what was going to happen, and he was ready to face that challenge.
So when did you guys start to experience adversity in that respect?
The same month we started dating. Right away. Yeah, I mean, I can laugh about it, but I mean, it happened immediately. There were people that he knew that didn't want to be his friend anymore. He had family members that were just hell no, and disowned him. I had people, not from my own family, but there were certain people that, it was kind of funny, people that I knew, they didn't say anything about the race issue. They were just is he gonna be one of those musicians that can't hold a job? They were more looking at it that, not the race issue. There was my family didn't give me any grief, for being with someone. They could kind of tell things were different between he and I, very serious. They didn't give me any grief for that. Just that, are you guys gonna be broke and he's gonna be on the street panhandling because he's a guitar player? It was the kind of that.
It's called busking when you have an instrument.
Nothing like back then. So.
um, n- ha- did your family have any biracial couples when you were
Yes,
growing up that you had
yes,
kind of seen that
I did.
before?
My family is kind of like a We Are the World. So I didn't see, like, wasn't thinking about relationships in a prism of race or ethnic background or anything like that. I had people in my lifetime growing up. We had white people, we had Italian people, we had all different kinds of people. So it was like no big deal, to date whomever. It's like I've dated black guys, Puerto Rican guys, white dudes. No Asians, but they're not hard to find around here. They were anyway. 80s. It wasn't really, you could barely maybe find one or two. So, but yeah, we were just like that. Our family just was like so inclusive of people. I'm not going to say we're perfect. I had one relative who was, still had a lot of fear and kind of prejudice towards bringing in like white people into the family. But again, based off the experiences that she faced growing up in such ugly racism, she was really concerned about that. But besides her, like no one else had any issues with it at all.
That's an interesting thing too, because I don't think a lot of people think about how difficult it is to let go of fear that is so ingrained.
Right.
I think about like when slavery first was abolished, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it took like 3 or 4 years for it to even actually be abolished for the entire
Right.
state, like following the Emancipation
Right.
Proclamation.
Didn't happen immediately. They had to work on their plans to still figure out how to keep these people shackled without the actual shackles.
Right.
So it didn't happen immediately.
But then, like you hear people talk about how, well, they just need to, chill out or whatever. It's not as bad as they
Right.
think it is, or, whatever. And, like, first of all, you're not in their shoes, so you can't
No.
tell me that it's not as bad for them as you think it is. But number two, even if it's not as bad now, the mentality that would make somebody think it's that bad has to come from some sort of experience that is so deeply ingrained
Right.
that, like, the thought of being vulnerable enough to accept a new reality just is not an option.
Right. And honestly, the way the temperature has gone up in this country, since 2015ish or so, um, I can tell people are looking at me differently. It used to be when we'd go out, sometimes people would look at us, and you just learn as a person that people, might be afraid of or prejudiced towards. You kind of learn to feel what they're feeling. And sometimes Bill would get upset when people would stare at us, but I'd be like, no, it's not that kind of stare. And then, I'd smile at them and they'd be like, oh my gosh, you have such a beautiful family. And then there's the other stare, like, like what? There was that kind of feeling from people. When Jordy was a baby, my oldest, I can remember being in a grocery store one day with Bill and I, and this older lady, she was like staring at us like she was going to just vomit. And, I heard her whisper to the person she was with about our child that was an abomination. So there was those people. I'm starting to see a lot of that again, like right now. Just like, and again, this is from a rural perspective in a small town, but I'm starting to feel that kind of, the kind of hatred, just like kind of seething again. So that's unfortunate, very unfortunate that, here we go again. So.
Well, speaking in terms of like the kind of like a pendulum swing of society, I know that, I guess for me, I would have been in 10th or 11th. I think I would have been in 11th grade when Obama was elected president. And I know for a lot of people, and I guess I'm speaking specifically for like hopeful white people, because like our school had 2 black kids, I think.
Okay. The whole
Maybe,
school, right?
yeah, like 2 or 3. So like, and they were significantly younger than I was. I think they were in freshman when I was a senior, but we thought that things were getting better. And then looking back and watching things, it's kind of weird to see how that kind of lit a fire.
Yeah.
How did that affect you, or from your perspective, what did you experience as far as the changes between, going from Bush to Obama?
I actually worked on the Obama campaign. I'd always loved politics. Like I grew up with politics, my household was not a household where you turned your back on what's happening in the country. I read newspapers before I went to school. That's the way I was fast to read. Time I didn't think it was like awesome, but looking back on it, I'm glad that that's the way I was raised, because yes, could watch whatever I wanted, but it was important that I watch the news every night. My grandmother made me read the newspapers. She had a subscription to newspapers, so I'd sit and read newspapers. So I've always had a passion for politics, and I actually almost majored in political science until I realized I was going to be. Yes, until I realized, oh, we're going to live here. That's going to be a wasted degree. So
political lack of science.
Right. So I had known who Barack Obama was. I had followed his Senate run, when he became a senator. I worked on that campaign. And I also knew and just felt deeply that he was going to be president, but I also knew that is going to piss off a big segment of the population. Yes, we're going to win because, the majority, they don't feel that way. They're not hatred. They don't have this bigotry. But there's going to be that minority population whose collective heads will explode because a Black man holding any kind of power is a threat to them. It's a huge threat. And you saw it, when he was elected president, the white supremacy groups, the activity kicked up by 1,000%. The threats against him and his family were unprecedented for any president. So I really believe, and you can ask people around me because we'll talk politics with me, and I had always said, to have Obama, though, what will follow? What's going to happen after Obama? What are we going to get? And the more his presidency went on, the worse that I felt that we were going to be stuck with something very ugly, because these people don't like this. They cannot handle that a Black man is in power. And we got Trump. So.
Which isn't even a white man, to be honest. It's very horribly burnt orange.
Orange.
I don't remember or recall. I remember Bush being elected and the whole Al Gore thing. And that was probably my first recollection of politics for me. But even that I wasn't paying very close attention. Were there attempts by other Black people to run for president prior to Obama?
Oh, yes, there's been a few. Jesse Jackson has ran for president. There's actually been quite a few attempts for people to run for president who were people of color. Nobody had that gravitas that Obama had. He had it all, I would say. I had read his books when he was running for the Senate. And, people laughed at me when I said, this guy, I was just he's got if you wanted to be a politician, if you wanted to change things, right? If you really wanted to make a difference, this guy's got it, and everybody's like, oh, no, he's never going to get anywhere. Look at his name, it's this is what they felt, and I'm just no, he's really got that something. And versus the other people of color who had ran for president in the past. And I was there was something about him that I'm he can break that barrier. He's going to be able to break that barrier. The Jesse Jacksons, they weren't going to be able to break that barrier to actually reach those middle-class housewives, white middle-class housewives. They couldn't break that, but I was he could break that. So, and he did. So I think that he was just the right person, calm, cool, intelligent.
I think too, I don't know a whole lot about Jesse Jackson. I know a little bit, but I feel like, and I might be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I feel like part of it was that when Obama was speaking, he was speaking for the whole of the country,
Right.
whereas Jesse Jackson kind of felt like he was coming from outside.
Well, and
Or
it's
at least
because
to white people, he would be perceived that way.
right. And you know, you're hitting something on the head, like the Jesse Jacksons, the Al Sharptons, you know. White people are never going to see them for what they did in civil rights. Okay, you know, some will, but most of them will feel threatened by them because they think that, oh, you know, they're con artists or whatever. They're not going to see like their civil rights, you know, what they've contributed to that, and then they're going to see that, oh, they're only going to help Black people. They're not going to help anybody else. You know, people like the Jesse Jacksons and the Reverend Al Sharptons. Whereas I think with Obama, people, you know, enough people anyway, felt like, you know, he is different. You know, he would help anyone, you know, anybody. So, but I think it was just that right time. It just, you know, I saw people who like supported him. He had a coalition of like a We Are the World type crowd of people like that really, really supported him. Different ethnic backgrounds, different, you know, financial class backgrounds, young, old. I mean, they all saw like the same thing with him. And you'd go to one of his rallies versus, you know, John McCain's rally, and it was like a totally different feeling. You know, these were the people who wanted things to go forward, you know, wanted us to be a better country, to treat each other better, you know, than what we've been doing. And so, and unfortunately, that didn't happen after, you know, Obama's, you know, his last term. We ended up with someone who just sided with the people who wanted to burn it down. You know, so, but that had been a seething thing throughout the Obama presidency. So much hatred. You know, I pay attention to the right-wing news, you know, the wacky websites. I read that stuff because that's how you find out, like,
Right.
what are people thinking? Yeah.
And I think, you know, that was something that was startling too, with this past election, to find out that Fox News was not right enough for a lot of people, to the point that it spurned other, even more far right out there news sources.
Yeah. If Fox isn't wacky enough for you, and I'm not talking about all Fox. They do have, you know, they have some serious journalists, you know, Chris Wallace and, you know, and Chuck Smith when he was there. But yeah, if the Tucker Carlsons and the Hannitys are just like not wacky enough for you, then yeah, that's pretty scary. So, but unfortunately, people will tell you, oh, they don't believe in this thing because they're prejudiced or, you know, they're racist. Yes, they do. Yes,
Right.
they are. They are.
You know, something that I've found interesting is that there's been this interesting shift from a few weeks ago where we had the incident with the twisted tea can, to a prominent country singer using racial slurs and being defended for it, by seemingly the same people.
Yeah.
And it is one of those things that, like, it doesn't come out of the woodwork until it absolutely has to, but it's definitely at the root of everything that happens. You know what I mean?
Yes, it is.
And I think that, I mean, if you go back in history, just not to say the conservative side of things, but I mean, I guess it would be, you know, kind of a conservative side of things, but there's always been this tie between fascism and racism.
There is.
And I fear for America now just because of how that is playing out, with everything with Trump and all of that. And by no means do I think that Joe Biden is the one that's going to fix everything. I kind of look at his presidency as just a stopgap between bleeding out and open heart surgery.
That's a good analogy. He can't fix everything, and there has to be, racism is always going to be taught by someone. Okay, there's always going to be that person who feels infringed upon, who comes from just this place of fear of things that they don't know, and they're going to pass that on to their children, and it's going to go on and on and on. So Joe Biden's not going to be able to fix what's wrong, but he's going to put in place people that, at least are adults, and they're really good at what they do. But there has to be, they have to do something with social media. The racism and the disgusting shit I see on social media is ridiculous. And we wouldn't even be having, these problems. We wouldn't have a Trump without social media. We wouldn't have this cult-like mentality for him and these whack theories and, without social media. So something has to be done. It's a cancer, and I use social media and I've been saying it for years. This is perpetuating so much hatred in this country, and it's just going to continue unless something stops. And, for a lot of people probably now, these young kids, social media might be the first place they actually experience racism versus, going out to a brick and mortar school or, wherever, going to church or wherever. That's probably the first place that they're going to see their first racism now, because people can get away with it. They can easily get away with it, and they can find people just like them.
I can't remember what publication it is. I want to say it's the Huffington Post or something along those lines, but their tagline is "Democracy dies in the dark." Mm-hmm. And I feel like that plays into the anonymity that social media provides.
Right.
That there is this sort of darkness that you can hide it or claim that it's not as close to us as what it is.
Right.
Even though it's right in our own backyard. So speaking about social media specifically, I mean, were there specific instances raising your own children where you saw them experience, or you experienced something that was different from your childhood growing up that you didn't expect from that sort of source?
Not social media so much. Pretty much everything that my kids experience, I figured that they would, they would. So that's why when I was raising them, I wouldn't sugarcoat what they're probably going to experience. I can remember my daughter, this boy she had a crush on in elementary school, and, her and her dad always were just like, we don't know what the parents are going to be like, and we always would tell her to be careful, because you don't know that their parents are going to be like us and very accepting of people that may not look like them. So, and I can remember she had invited this little boy to go roller skating, and I was going to take the kids all skating in a little group. So I wanted to meet the mom, to let the mom, meet me, that I'm going to have her child. I'm going to take them to the skating rink. And I can remember when the lady came to the door and her little boy said, "This is Jordy's mom." Like, the look on her face was like, oh my God. And like, I went to shake her hand and she wouldn't touch me. She refused to touch me. And then she wouldn't let her son be around Jordy anymore. So I has told my kids, this is what you're going to deal with. It's not going to happen all the time, but you got to be ready for this. People are just going to look at us and just be like, nope, because we don't like the color of your skin. That's reality. That's life. Deal with it and move on, because for every person that's like that, there's going to be a whole bunch of other people who aren't like that. So don't let that defeat you. Never let it defeat you. And so everything that my kids went through, I think they had it a little better. There was a lot more going through like elementary school and high school. When they were growing up, there was a lot more focus on, hey, we're not going to tolerate that kind of thing. But then, we're growing up in the time where it's like zero tolerance of anything. No racism. You can't call another kid a name or you're going to get in trouble. They grew up in that environment. But I mean, what you got on social media, it was a free for all. Do what you want. Call people what you want. Bully people all you want. I mean, so yeah, social media just took the place of how you probably would have been acting. Some of these people anyway would have been acting out in the real world. But no, they face racism too. Nothing, as much as things change, it always stays the same. Always. I just had a racist thing happen to me with my job. I was talking to someone over the phone. A lot of people I work with have never actually met me. They've never actually seen me. And this lady that I've been working with her, helping with her case for the last 4 years, she started just kind of going on a little bit of a tangent here about, religion and, how God is punishing us or whatever. And she said, and I pray for everyone except those N-words. And I said, don't say that to me. I said, that's very offensive to me. And I said, you shouldn't say that to me. And she's like, why? She was like, do you pray for N-word? And I was like, listen, I said, I try to be kind and decent to everyone. Okay. And I said, and yes, I'm offended by it because I am a person of color. I have been that person of color since the first time you spoke to me in 2017. You answered the phone today saying that you were so happy to talk to me, and that it's been a while. You asked about my family. I asked about yours. And I said, in all this time, I've still been a Black woman since 2017 when we talked. And you're sitting here saying that right now. I wasn't mean to her, but I was just pointing out what fool you are. What an idiot you are. And how wrong you are to act like that. And what gives you this entitled sense that you think that it's okay to say these things now? But I'm sure you can guess why she thinks it's okay to say that to someone she truly doesn't know. Someone that she's talking to over the phone. But by the time all of a sudden it was done, she was crying, and I was just like, wow, this is really lame. I wouldn't call up the DMV and be like, now about those damn, I don't even know a racial slur so I don't even anything. Give me a racial slur. Yeah. If I didn't like Italian people, for instance, because Bill always says, I wouldn't say to someone at the DMV, like, I'm not going to pray for those damn Dagos. Why would I do that? Like, right. Why do you think that they would be on your side too? But why? Because of where we're at right now in this country.
Yeah. So, and that's another thing that I think that social media does is it provides this echo chamber that doesn't force you to be in situations that can break your preconceived notions about things.
Right. Exactly right.
Not to make excuses for that lady, but I mean, that could very well be like one of the few times that she's ever talked to a Black person.
She didn't know she was talking to a Black person either.
Right, right. Well, even more like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, right. So like for her, right. She's not thinking that you're Black because she's never talked to a Black person, and everything in her experience has told her that that's not what that experience would be like. I wonder, like, what exactly, it's got to be some sort of, I would assume, narcissism that allows somebody, I mean, they always say, like, nothing brings people together like a shared enemy.
Right.
But you can only see somebody that's not an enemy as an enemy if there's a certain cocktail of things happening in your own life. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But like, what brings people to, and it's just, it baffles me, I guess, just because I look for logic in most of what I do. And so when I am unable to find it, it's kind of flabbergasting, but like it's incredibly confusing to me what would bring somebody to say, maybe like, I'm not making enough money and it's because of affirmative action.
Right. Or it's because of immigrants. Yeah, they're taking my job, picking those oranges I was never going to work at anyway.
Right. And not to mention, like, what job did you get where you just showed up and did it?
Yeah.
And took it from somebody. Like, you ripped somebody else's apron off and put it on yourself. Like, that was given to you by somebody.
Right.
And it just seems like there's a lot of displaced anger that's led to a lot of fear as generations go on and whatnot. So what do you think is the remedy? I mean, I know you said that there's always going to be racism. There's always going to be prejudice because as much as things change, everything stays the same on some level. But what do we do now to kind of make the pendulum go back the other way?
Honestly, and it could be done because things were undone in the past, there has to be some kind of legislation to change the consumption of media. Okay. I really don't think we would be where we're at with the likes of QAnon and Trump and all this whack stuff if not for social media. You have to make it harder for these people to come together and to get into this cult-like mentality. You know, there has to be some kind of legislation. They need to change the rules with the FCC as far as the media, the television and radio go. There shouldn't be Newsmax, okay? It isn't news, it's propaganda, as with most of the things you see on Fox. There shouldn't be shows like Rush Limbaugh. It's propaganda. And we didn't used to have it. You know, we didn't used to have like the Rush Limbaughs, the Fox News. You know, it used to be the facts, the truth, you know, not this other world where you're trying to shock people for ratings and money. You know, social media shouldn't be an open just highway of, hey, anybody can do anything they want and like get away with it. Okay, you can have hate groups, you can do whatever, you can do crazy other things. There has to be somebody bringing in some kind of control. People themselves will take something and they'll go out of control with it. And unless there's some kind of legislation to change it, I don't see how it gets any better. I really don't. You know, I have people that I live right beside who believe in this whack nonsense QAnon thing. They believe the president really, you know, Joe Biden's not the president and the Trump one. These are not just the weirdos hanging out in their mother's basement as they used to paint these people. These are our neighbors. These are people that we work with. These are people that we go to school with or live beside who are in a completely different reality because of social media. They're not getting it from the supermarket. They're not getting it at their job site. They're getting it from social media. They're watching YouTube. They're watching, you know, getting involved in these chat rooms. And it has to be up to, I would say, even if it has to be up to even the younger generation. It's not the younger generation that is falling for this shit, okay? It's people who have no business online because they don't know what they're doing online, okay? And that, myself and up, okay, that they shouldn't even be online without some kind of parental control because they don't even know how to use the internet right. Okay.
I was gonna say, like, if you need your kids to set your internet up for you, you probably shouldn't be on the internet.
You shouldn't even be on it. Okay. And I'm going to call that right now. I don't care what anybody thinks, anybody who sees that. You know, a lot of people are completely ignorant to using social media and the internet. They're the same people who are always getting hacked and, you know, they got to shut their Facebooks down because somebody hacked them because they're clicking on links. You know, they're those people that are watching, you know, and are susceptible. And so until that changes and until we can have some kind of control over what these people, what we're all consuming, it shouldn't be out there. You shouldn't be able to allow to set up a group chat that's filled with hate and propaganda. You know, why? So the Zuckerbergs of the world can make more money while you're literally destroying society? It's like, hell no. You know, it should be like anything else. And I don't believe for a minute that infringes upon free speech. You know, I can't go to work and spout off and say that, you know, oh yeah, I think that there's Jewish space lasers. I couldn't do that at my job.
Well, I mean, like, first of all, like, freedom of speech is who other people don't provide you that freedom.
Right.
The freedom comes from the government.
Right.
Which means that if your freedom of speech is being infringed upon by somebody other than the government, it does not break the constitutional rule.
It doesn't. Well, most people don't know that though.
And that's the thing too, is like, well,
right.
like the deregulation with the, you know, I mean, like, we've been screaming for regulation with online companies forever. And from the right, we've seen pushback because of, you know, a push for small government. And now once it's not in their favor, everything needs to be regulated. Cancel culture's out, you know.
Out of control.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
It's crazy to me to see people go on national television claiming they've been deplatformed.
Yes. And censored.
You're on national television.
Exactly.
Like,
what crazier that, you know, the people I just talked about, like, you know, our neighbors, you know, don't believe them. They'll be sitting right there watching them on national TV. So, hey, do you got a gig on national TV? Or have you been invited to be on national TV? What? No. Then obviously they're communicating in a way you're not even able to do that. Okay? They're not being censored. Okay, and that's the problem. And they know it. When I used to study political science, one of the things that just made me think about how kind of dirty, it's kind of a dirty background, is how the psychiatrists and the psychiatry behind slogans, how they make people believe them, like to believe this nonsense. Right now, these people that are like close to Trump, the Josh Hawleys, the Marjorie Taylor Greens, nobody would really care who they are, if it wasn't for, they've got these built-in Trump supporters, right? If they were just on their own and Trump wasn't a thing, I guarantee you they'd be nothing. Okay, they wouldn't be anything. But now they ride Trump's coattails. So Trump supporters are going to believe what they say, even if they say, I'm being censored, while they're telling them that on national television. They'll believe it. That's how far down the hole they are. So.
And I just don't understand what gets us to that point. And I don't know. I've always wanted to believe, or I grew up believing, that liberals were there to make sure, or conservatives were there to make sure there are some lines that we don't cross, and liberals are there to make sure there are some lines that we don't draw.
Yeah.
But like the further we go on, it seems like it's hard for me, and I know that I know Republicans that are good-hearted people. But when I look at their leadership, I'm hard pressed to find anybody that is similar to the people that I know.
It's getting harder and harder to find. I can remember with my, I've always been kind of like an in-betweener, Republican and Democrat. There are some things that I am firmly a proud Democrat of, and there are other things that and probably more to the left, as people say, I'm just not there, not with everything. And I can remember having good conversations and jokes, and actually living in a society where you could talk about these things with, your peers. And guess what? Nobody hated each other, nobody wanted to disown each other. And then, like I said, the big driver, social media again, it's ruined everything. So the Republicans, and why you're not seeing a lot of Republicans that kind of represent them anymore, it's because the party is dying because it's being overtaken by this extreme right, not based in reality group of people. And it's going to get worse if something doesn't change. It'll get worse.
Yeah. It's interesting. Something I hadn't thought about, I can't remember. I think it was in comments on a post that I was reading, so I'm not even sure who the person is that said it. But they said that they came from a country where there are multiple parties, lots of parties. And they said that the thing that you don't think about in that situation is that a lot of them are similar, but a lot of them have such big differences that it cuts the voting pool into such small fractions that it's hard to get an outcome that a majority appreciates.
Right.
And so I wonder how that will play out. Going forward, I know that Trump's talked about starting his own party or, whatnot. And as good as I think that would be for the Republicans of old and to be able to keep that intact, I also see that splitting conservatism into to the point that conservatives never win again.
That probably would be what would happen. We're literally watching a political party hang itself, in real time. We're watching that because they are walking into the town. They've been courting this for longer than you've been alive. They have been courting these just out there people. Okay. That was the party that these people would go to. And it has gotten worse. So it's going to come down to what is the Republican Party, because it's becoming the party. It is already the party of Trump, and it's becoming the party of the Marjorie Taylor Greens. So how do you even take a party like that seriously? How do you expect them to do any legislation with people like that? So I don't know what's going to happen. You know, like, are they going to try to put the brakes on this after their, you know, their primary runs? The disgusting thing is that these people are doing it just for political reasons, you know, just because they want to be nominated again. You know, I'm sure most of the people think that Marjorie Taylor Greene is a complete whack job, you know, but they can't say that because her voters are Trump voters, which will be their voters. So they have to play along. Well, they don't have to. They could actually stand up and do the right damn thing, but that's what they choose to do.
You know, that's what I see from like Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz and people of that nature, is just I think the fear of losing what they have for themselves.
That's exactly what it is. It's power. It's that fear of losing that power. They will do whatever they need to do to hang on to it, even if it's to support insurrection, you know, sedition. How unconstitutional are you that you support this? You know, these people don't love their country. They love their paychecks. They love their power. I'm not talking about the paycheck they get from the government. I'm talking about the donors, you know, the corporate donors that they get. And they love the power that they have, and they refuse to let go of it. They're hanging on to it by their teeth, even though they're supporting things like they would have probably not 20 years ago ever thought that they would support, you know, sedition and insurrection, but yet here they are. So it's just unbelievable. And yes, we're going a little bit off racism, but not really, because a big fuel to this fire and love of Trump and his ilk is racism. So,
right. I mean, like, just look at the differences in the pictures of how preparations were made between the Black Lives Matter protests in December to January 6th.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My neighbors think Black Lives Matter are terrorists. You know, Bill and I were trying to talk to them about this. They're convinced that Antifa is a thing and that Black Lives Matter is all a terrorist group. They're convinced that that's true because Trump said so. And you know, if Trump says it, well, then it must be true, right? So that's...
You know, and that's the thing, too. I watched an interview recently of a mom who was lucky enough to be able to get out of QAnon. But, you know, one of the things she said was if Trump would have just announced it, it would have been over for her. I mean, she wouldn't have believed it any further. And it's difficult to accept that somebody's unwilling to make those statements, but it's even harder to accept that we're in a situation where people will allow themselves to be dictated by one person.
It's frightening, isn't it? And I guess I have always been the type of person who has questioned cult mentality. I don't understand it. I have always just been like kind of flabbergasted by it. You know, I can remember when I was working on the Obama campaign, and I can remember Bill asking me this question, and he was like, well, you know, you Obama lovers are kind of a cult. And then it was just like, a cult and people who believe in their like one person that they follow or whatever, they'll question nothing. They will not say in their minds, you know, I don't really agree with that. You know, they will just listen. And I was like, I'm not surrounded by people who just like listen. You know, the thing about when he wasn't into politics, but I'm like, no, I'm like, you see a lot of people, and they've done a lot of research, you know, right wing people versus left wing. We think, we question, you know, we want answers, you know, serious answers. We want to see different sources of answers. But there's got this group of people who Trump just lit the fire that they already had. You know, they were already feeling bigoted. They had a black president, like that they couldn't come to terms with that. You know, they don't like seeing Black Lives Matter. You know, they think, oh my God, you know, they're terrorists. You know, they're going to like destroy our cities and like steal our children and eat them or something. You know, they see people of, you know, Hispanic descent that's stealing their jobs. You know, it's like, they didn't steal your job. You know, you didn't want to do that job in the first place. You know, so they already had this like ingrown thing of the other. They already could not stand the other. They were afraid of the other. And he just came out, told them basically, it's okay, me too. I don't like these people either. I hate Mexicans and blackies and all this and that. So that is like their Messiah. That is like their savior. So they believe every word that comes out of this man's mouth. You know, so I don't know how we reach these people, to be honest with you. We need to get them off the internet. That is one way. I will say that, because the longer that they stay on the internet, the longer that they're going to be living in another reality. But, besides that, I don't know how we reach them. I see Fox fired Lou Dobbs. Lou Dobbs wouldn't get on the train and just say, hey, look, Trump lost that election. So they got rid of him finally because he's perpetuating this lie continuously.
Well, it comes after a threat of legal action.
Right.
And so you see how quickly these things disintegrate when it's put to the pressure. Because like the thing is like if it was true, you'd keep reporting on it.
Exactly. But so far is they can get away with it, which is why I believe it has to come down to legislation and laws on the books that has to change things. We have to change things, or this is just going to continue to be a problem.
Well, in terms of legislation changing things, what steps do you think need to be taken with law enforcement in terms of being able to enforce future legislation?
Well, talking law enforcement, or are we talking actually like legislature? Law enforcement, that's a whole other bag of conversation. But with legislature, this is a big problem too. How do we get the legislation with the likes of the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, like being voted into Congress? So that's the only way to change something is to change the law. Okay. So I don't know how we get there when we still have people like her. Right now, people need to make some actions. They need to do something because the Democrats control the House and the Senate, but with the Senate it's weak. They need to do something while we have that, start getting those proposals, the proposals that people have had for years to rein in social media and these talk shows that are spreading propaganda. I don't understand why anybody in this country wants to be like North Korea or someplace like that and just have like propaganda spoon-fed to you. But the problem is they don't know that we are because they believe what they see and they don't understand that it's false and it's propaganda to make them believe a certain way. They don't understand that they're being manipulated on social media and the algorithms are showing things are showing from their feed to keep this perpetuated lie going. They don't even know that. So things have to change and it has to start breaking up Facebook. Okay. No one's person and company should have that much control over people's lives,
Oh, right. Well, and not only that,
right.
but their monopoly behavior.
Yes.
I mean, they literally buy their competitors, absorb the new feature into what they already have, and then disintegrate the company.
Right. So again, this is going to have to come from Congress. So until we do something like that, I don't know how we remedy this other than lights out for everybody. Like there's just a big EMP and everybody's disconnected. So, but no, it has to come from Congress. It does. That's where we start. But again, how do we start when we have the likes of people like her in Congress?
Well, and just like, the other thing too is like when you have, I mean, Joe Biden ran on this idea of unity and wanting to restore the soul of the nation.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have this stimulus package that everybody wants.
Right.
Even the right wants. I mean, maybe not like the people in Congress, but normal people want it. And Republicans are standing in the way to the point that when we do take the majority action that we have the availability to, then like it kind of like almost reinforces their bullshit that we're like out to get them or something, because we're just like, using our muscle and strong arming them and into the way that we want things.
Oh yeah.
So delusional.
It's I mean, there is way more majority support for the stimulus. Okay. So if any of the Republicans, whether you're a Trumpy Republican or you're the Susan Collins type Republican, it's okay to vote on it because across the country, people want it. Okay, they might not want some features of it, but it is. They're just going to stand up and won't play ball. Just to say, hey, look, we're not going to work with him. We're not going to do this. But and that mentality that feeds right into this whole Trumpian crap again, because if they work with Joe Biden, then, that means that, oh my God, they're legitimizing his presidency. They're going to work with him first. So I'm telling you, if you go, I'm sure you've seen it where you live, people won't take these, really cult mentality. They won't take down their Trump signs because they still think, oh my gosh, something's going to happen and he's really going to be president again. That's what they think.
I don't know how much you drive on Route 8, but coming to Titusville, between Franklin and Titusville, there's a house that has these signs up like Trump or war is the big one.
Yeah.
And it's like you see shit like that, and then those people will claim that like the Capitol riots were started by Antifa that were posing as Trump supporters. It's like, what the fuck are you?
It blows your mind, doesn't it? It really does. It blows my mind. I know what you're talking about. And like today we were driving on 322, and there's been a house that has like, it's always had like a lot of Trump stuff up and everything. And today, along with the Trump flags, there are two Confederate flags, and they hung the U.S. flag upside down. And I had a friend of mine who's ex-military, and he said, and he was like, these people make me sick. They're so devoted to one man and that man's ideas that they have the audacity to call themselves patriots and hang the American flag upside down, because Trump's not president. That just like really, really messed with this guy's mind. And I was like, these people, I mean, what do you do? I mean, where do they get these ideas from? They didn't just grow up in the garden. These people are addicted to the Alex Joneses of the world. Again, social media crap. So what do we do? They're just going to keep consuming this diet of fake reality unless something happens, unless something changes. And like I told you, that people in my neighborhood who feel this way. Now I'm always preface it, oh, well, I'm not prejudiced or anything. I'm like, okay, whatever you say.
I feel like if anybody ever starts a phrase with that or a sentence with that, whatever follows is about to be hella prejudice. Like,
Exactly. And
I don't hate black people. I just don't like the color of their skin. Like what? You know what I mean? Like,
right. Well, for one example, this person said, well, I'm not prejudiced or anything, but I don't appreciate that like Mexicans come and like take about a job or blah blah blah. I'm like, well, they didn't take your job. Do you actually work with anybody of Hispanic origin? No. I'm like, well, they didn't take your job. What are you talking about? You don't even know anybody Hispanic, do you?
Right.
I had to admit, no, he didn't. But they're going to take his job.
Well, see, and there's the part too, is like it just perpetuates this situation where you don't have to experience anything outside of your bubble.
Yeah.
And there's nothing to break that mentality that is ingrained in people.
I know. I don't, I don't go out as much now because of the pandemic, of course, around people that much, but even the little bit that I do, it's like I said, I've noticed, especially if Bill and I are together, we're seeing a lot more people like just look at us like with such hatred, with so much hatred. And I'm like, that's a shame because for the most part, once we got past maybe the 90s, we stopped having like some of these experiences with people, like some of these racist experiences. They became a little bit less and less. And now, like, total strangers, we're starting to like have people just like look at it. I think they're still quite afraid to say something. They're not ready to just like come right out and be like, oh, whatever. But they want to, and they want to. So there's places now that I don't even feel comfortable like driving like through. Like I never felt that like maybe like 10 years ago. I didn't feel that way, but I do now because they're emboldened now. Versus before. We're not naive to think that, it's kumbaya and there's no racism or anything, but they're just so emboldened now. It's a different temperature now.
Oftentimes, the responsibility to change things falls on the people who shouldn't be responsible to change things. And what do you think our next steps are, or what would you say to viewers in terms of things that we can do in our everyday life to help move the needle forward? I know
Well,
that we kind of veered off a little bit with politics, but
right.
something I
But
always say is, politics are just it's the set of ideals which we view the world through, and that we use as like a reference point for our actions. And so to say that you're not political is not true. You just don't pay attention to politics. You know what I mean?
exactly. No, and I think talking about something like racism, of course, politics are going to come into it, because where would we be right now if it wasn't for people who knew right from wrong and who knew what a good human should be? It took those people to change laws, or else I wouldn't be talking to you. What if nothing changed? So yeah, politics is definitely something. If you're going to talk about racism, it has its place as well. It's going to have to come into the conversation. And as far as people who, yeah, maybe it's not their responsibility, but is it everyone's responsibility though to guide people that have fears and ignorance? If you can show them decency and something to change their mind with those fears and ignorance, isn't that all of our responsibilities? I think it is. I do think it is. Like what I said with the person that I had, the customer that I had. Yeah, it would have been really easy for me to take the offer, like, you know what, I don't want to work with her anymore. It's like, I don't want to deal with that sort of thing anymore. Let somebody else deal with her. That's the easy way. The harder way, but the best way, and it's really not that hard. Show her something she doesn't know. Show her something different. And I've always been that person, which, my family can tell you. I never shut down the racist. I didn't turn my back on somebody who was prejudiced. I didn't not speak to them. If there's a lot of prejudiced people, they'll still talk to you. Well, they say they hate a certain group of people, but they'll talk to them anyway sometimes. I was never that person who would just, I have known people, people in our own family who thought that they believed something. Like I said, there were certain people, my husband's family, who disowned him for his relationship with me. And I didn't hate that person for it. I was disappointed that someone could feel that way. And years and years and years ago, like I wrote the person a letter, to tell them basically what they were going to miss if they continued down that path of thinking. Well, eventually, it didn't happen overnight, but it happened. That person and I became very, very close, in his family. And you can't just cancel people out automatically. Listen to them, show them something that they might not ever know. If they don't ever take the chance to meet somebody from a group of people that they're racist towards, if they never meet someone or get to know that person, how will they ever change their way of thinking? They won't. So I don't believe in, like, what you're talking about, that cancel, all that, just shutting somebody down. No, have the dialogue. If they're willing to have it, you have it too. And it can be difficult. It's not easy, but you should be willing to have it, because that's how we change people. That's how we come together. People shouldn't just automatically be hating each other, but it is. And some people, it's just ingrained into them. And sometimes it takes one experience to change that way of thinking. So that's our responsibility. That is our responsibility.
It makes me think of the movie Mulan.
Mm-hmm. Are we talking the cartoon version or the
I haven't watched the live action one yet. Mostly because, like, I understand the cultural reasons for it, but I'm still a little salty they removed all the music and took out Mushu. But
me too.
the cartoon at the beginning, when the emperor is telling them to call all the warriors who aren't part of the military anymore, he says 1 grain of rice could tip this scale. 1 man could make all the difference. And I think that, in my own life, that has played out in situations where, well, I'm sure we don't need to get into the dirty details of it, but I've definitely been in situations where I didn't deserve the grace that I got or the mercy that I got. But it's those situations that have been the biggest impact as far as making changes within myself,
Right.
which is another part of the reason why I love having you here, because you were there for that. But thank you for having the conversation and sharing your
Absolutely.
experience with us. Always
Thank
a
you
pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for asking me. And I like what you're doing, because the more people talk about it, the more it doesn't have to be this big boogeyman in the room. People should be open, talk about it, talk about their experiences. Let the people who are prejudiced talk about why they think the way that they do. And this is the mistake that I think people are making, that just want to shut people down. Like that country guy. I don't listen to country music really, but I know who he is. And I know that he was using racial slurs, and like he's just getting shut down. He was doing other things though that were detrimental probably to his well-being prior to that, from what I've read and understand. So yeah, maybe someone should step in and save him from himself, but don't just shut him down. Keep that dialogue open. It's like people now tend to want to, if they disagree with each other, they just like, nope, we're done. The more we do that to each other, the more difficult it's going to be to move beyond, this bigotry and this hatred. If we keep shutting people out, if I'd have shut that person out that I was talking to you about, we both would have lost a beautiful relationship. So you just try not to. I know it's hard, but everybody should try, even if it's just one person at a time. That's all it takes.
All right. Well, thank you for your encouraging words, and until we meet again,
Okay.
enjoy your shrimp. Tell Bill I said hello.
I will tell him he's giving me a steak dinner.
Oh, rub it in. Right. Well, thank you, Vera, again for joining us for this installment of the Gift of Gab podcast. I hope that the conversation that we had today was enlightening and gave you some things to think about, as well as some tangible things, maybe even some little things that you can take on in your personal life to help build the society that we all want to live in. If you're observant, you're noticing that I am in a completely different outfit than I was in for the interview, and that's because I forgot to record an outro for this episode when everything was getting said and done. Now, this may be leading you to think, what in the world is going on with this person? Hopefully, it's inquisitively enough that you'll check us out next week when the podcast airs again for episode 2. Now, normally this will be on Sundays at 7 p.m. This week it was on Wednesday. It was due to a technical difficulty, but I will see you again Sunday at 7 p.m. right here on YouTube. Or you can listen audio only on any of the podcast platforms listed. Until next time, keep talking. I'm Gabe Bryan, and I'll see you then.